Today we are comparing and ordering fractions, decimals, and percents. To accurately compare fractions, decimals, and percents, we have to write them all in the same form. If I'm trying to compare a fraction to a percent, that gets pretty confusing if you don't know how to do that in your head. You don't know all the equivalent forms. So, we are going to write them all as fractions, all as decimals, or all as percents. Here's an example. Which is greater? 81% or 4/5? We have to have them in the same form, either both as percents, both as fractions, or both as decimals. So I'm going to start with 81%, and I'm going to write that as a fraction. To take a percent and write it as a fraction, you take whatever number that is and put it over 100. If you need help with that, go back to one of the previous lessons and watch that video that tells you how to go from a percent to a fraction. Then I could take this 81 over 100, or 81%, they mean the same thing, and you can write it as a decimal. So to take 81%, we move our decimal place 2 spots to the left, and then you have your decimal. This reads as 81 hundredths. This fraction reads as 81 hundredths. The denominator is 100, and we have 81 out of 100. So you know that your numerator, 81, is going to end in the hundredths place. That is where this 1 is. And then your decimal fits 2 spots before the hundredths place. Now if I have my 4/5 and I write this as a fraction, I need denominator to be 100. So to make 5 into 100, you multiply by 20. What you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator so that the value of your fraction stays the same. When we multiply top and bottom by the same number, that doesn't change the value. That's like multiplying by 1. It's just changing what these numbers look like. So if I were to reduce this, I get back down to 4/5. Now I have 80 over 100. Both of my fractions have the same denominator. I could stop here. I can accurately compare which one is larger. But let's see. If I take 80 over 100 and I write that as a decimal, I'll get 0.80. Because my 0 here in 80 is in the hundredths place, and that's what 80 over 100 means. I don't have to write this 0. 0.8 is the same as 0.80. So now with these, I can compare, and I can accurately and confidently say 81% is greater than 4/5. So another example, which one is the smallest? I have 2 over 50, 0.03, and 1.9%. So to see which one is the smallest now, we need them all in the same form. All as fractions, all as decimals, or all as percents. So if I take 2 over 50 and I write it as a fraction, I'm going to have 4 over 100. Multiply top and bottom by 2, and I get 4 over 100. That would be 0.04 as a decimal. This is 4 hundredths, so I know my 4 goes in the hundredths place. 0.03 is already a decimal. I converted this one into a decimal, so I'm going to leave that the same. Now for 1.9%, to change this into a decimal, I take my decimal place from where it is and move it 2 spots to the left, filling in any empty spots with a 0. So this would be 0.019 as a decimal. Now I have a decimal, a decimal, and a decimal. And to compare, we look at the hundredths place to know which one is the smallest. All their numbers before are the same. They're actually all 0. So if my whole number is the same, I look at the 10th place. If the 10th places are all the same, move one more to the right and look at your hundredths place. So now I'm comparing 1, 3, and 4. 1 is the smallest, and so I know that 0.19 is the smallest. So we put them all as decimals so that we can compare them. So this one is my answer. Here's another one. Order these from least to greatest. If I have 17%, okay, 1.7, and 17 over 50. So I think it's easiest if we put them all as decimals, because usually to get from a percent to a fraction, you have to go through a decimal. To go from a fraction to a percent, decimals are usually used. They're kind of like the middle ground. I think they're easier to convert between all three of them. So if I leave it as a decimal, I'm leaving 1.7 alone. For 17%, I take my decimal from where it is and move it 2 spots to the left. So I have 0.17. And then to turn 17 over 50 into a decimal, I need a denominator 100. To turn 50 into 100, we multiply by 2. What you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. And so I get 34 over 100. Now this 34 over 100 is 34 hundredths, so my 4 is going to end in the hundredths place. That's here, and my decimal is not right in front of the 4, but in front of the digit in front of that. So now I have decimal, 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 and I can accurately compare these now. So to order them from least to greatest, I have 0.17, 0.34, and 1.7. Now here's another one. You and 2 friends are practicing free throws. You make 12 out of 20 of your free throws. Friend 1 makes 0.55. Let's just say this is an average, because I don't know how you'll make 0.55% of one free throw. So it's an average. We're just comparing, so it's okay. And friend 2 makes 64% of their throws. Who makes the most of their free throws? So when I look at this, I want to pull out the numbers. So I have 12 over 20, 0.55, and 64%. I need them all to be in the same format. So if I take my first fraction, 12 out of 20, make it into a fraction with denominator 100, I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 5. And then I get 60 over 100, and that is 60%. That is what you shoot, 60%. Now if I take 0.55 and I turn that into a percent, I move my decimal 2 places to the right and then stick a percent symbol on the end. So I have 55%. 64% is already a percent, so I'm going to leave it alone, and we can compare. 60%, 55%, and 64%. This was you, friend 1, and friend 2. So, friend 2 makes the most of their free throws. Alright, now I have another kind of example. So 100 people were surveyed for their favorite fruit. Fill in the blanks and plot on a number line. So we have fruits such as apples, oranges, strawberries, grapes, and bananas. I'm going to have fractions, decimals, and percents. So I'm going to make a nice chart here. And I know that the people who chose apples as their favorite fruit is 1/5. The people who chose oranges as their favorite fruit was 13 out of 50. Strawberry's favorite fruit was 0.37. We have 15% for grapes and 0.02 for bananas. So now I have to fill in the blanks. To do that, I need to have all of these filled in. So I'm going to take 1/5 and turn it into a decimal. To easily do that, I need a denominator 100. So I multiply top and bottom by 20, and I have, that is 20 over 100. As a decimal, that is 0.20. To turn this into a percent, I take my decimal from where it is, move it 2 spots to the right, so now it's going to be at the end, and stick a percent symbol on that. For 13 over 50, to make that into a decimal, multiply top and bottom by 2. 50 times 2 is 100. 13 times 2 is 26. This is 26 over 100, so that's 26 hundredths. So that is 0.26. The 6 is in the hundredth spot. To take a decimal, turn it into a percent, move your decimal 2 spots to the right, and that is 26%. Now here with strawberries, I'm starting with a decimal. To go from a decimal to a percent, that's pretty easy. Take my decimal, move it 2 spots to the right, stick a percent on there. To turn 37 hundredths into a fraction, I do 37 over 100. And I think, can I reduce that? And I cannot. 37 is a prime number, so that's just going to stay there. Now with grapes, I start with 15%, and I need to make that into a decimal. So I will take my decimal point from here. It's not written there, but when you don't have a decimal, we just kind of know that it's at the end of the number. So 15, move it 2 spots to the left, and I get 0.15. You don't need to have the 0 in front, but usually decimal places get lost if you don't have that 0. Now I have 0.15, that is 15 hundredths, so I write 15 over 100, that is 15 hundredths. And I can reduce these. One ends in a 5 and one ends in a 0. So I can divide each by 5 and I get 3 over 20. 3 is a prime number, so this is simplest form. Now with bananas, I start with a decimal. To turn this into a percent, I move my decimal place 2 spots to the right, and I get 2%. To turn 0.02 into a fraction, this is 200ths. So I put 2 over 100. These are both even. I know I can reduce them. If I divide each by 2, I get 1 over 50. So now I have filled in all the spots, and that is done. Now I have to plot it on a number line. So if I make a number line here, I could put 0, and I could put 100. In the middle I have 50. Here would be 25. And then I have numbers in between. Those would be going by 5s. Now the easiest part, since this is out of 100, I know percents mean out of 100. I'm going to take the percent and put it on the number line. So I have apples at 20, oranges at 26, strawberries at 37, grapes at 15, and bananas at 2. So now I have filled in all the gaps in my chart and I plotted on a number line.